Hi there Jeep owners. Today in your 2020 Jeep Grand Cherokee, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Blue Ox's base plate. And this is what our base plate looks like when it's installed. The base plate is going to be behind our fascia here, so it's going to be mostly hidden with just our attachment points sticking through where the tow hooks used to be. We do have some cutouts here in the front that really aren't 100% necessary. It does depend on the braking system and things that you've decided to install, if you're going to use these components or not. It does come with the bracket that we're using here to mount up our 6-way, but it's just a bracket. You can mount it wherever you want. This is where we chose to mount it, so that way it's easy to attach to and it kind of keeps everything sucked up inside. But if you did want to mount that in another location so you didn't have to modify the fascia here, you could do so, but you just got to figure out how you would do that. It also comes with a bracket for mounting up your breakaway switch over here as well. And again, this one you can choose where you want to put it. It doesn't have a set location. This is just where we chose to put it. But I do like that it does come with some accommodation for mounting up a breakaway switch and electrical connector. I usually prefer base plates that have those connections made into the base plate, just because you don't then have to figure out, well, where am I going to put these parts and how am I going to make it look nice. So I don't really particularly care the way Blue Ox kind of just give you some brackets, and as you put it on here, I believe Demko is very similar. They just give you some brackets and just say, hey, make it work, figure it out. I usually prefer and recommend Roadmaster's base plates, because they usually have those integrated into the base plate, and I just think you get a better look at the end, and it also simplifies the installation. But with that being said, let's turn our attention to the attachments here on the end. We've currently got it in the normal position where you'd just be driving this around town. So that way it's kind of minimizing how much it sticks out here in front. And this is where I definitely have it if I was going to be parking this in my garage, not using it. That way there's minimizing the chance when I walk by that my shin's not going to hit on it or anything like that. That can really be painful. Next to the attachment point, we've got our safety chain loop attachment. There's going to be one of these on each side, so you can get your safety chains attached as well. When you're ready to hook up your tow bar, we can put it in that tow bar mode by inserting our ends here. These simply slide into place. We'll give it a little twist until the pin locks it in, and we're now ready to attach a tow bar to this arm over here. We're going to go ahead and slide the one on the other side in as well. But you can see that when you're in the tow mode here with these attachments in place, it does stick out a little further, and there is that possibility when you're walking by, you might get a clunk on the shin, and you're going to be saying some things that you wouldn't want people at church to hear. So we're going to slide in this other one, and then we'll get our tow bar attached. And then we'll bring our arms up, lining it up with the attachment on our base plate. We can then slide our pins through and secure it on the other side. We'll then do the same thing for our other arm. We can go ahead and finish making our connections here, which includes our safety cables. So we'll hook those onto the attachment points there. As well as our electrical connection. And then if we have a supplemental braking system, you'll want to hook that up as well. That usually involves a breakaway cable. And depending on the braking system that you have, you may or may not have an additional connection. So we've got that one there. Our braking system that we've got today is Demko's Air Force One, which is specifically designed to work with air brakes. So you'll have an airline connection for that one. So we're just going to attach that up now. And of course, when hooking up your safety cables, it's important that you cross your safety cables. So the one on the driver's side here, I'm hooking to the passenger side on the motorhome, and vice versa with the other one. And of course, we'll get our electrical connector plugged in as well. One of the components you may or may not need after you install your base plate and you go to hook it to your motorhome is a high-low adapter. If your motorhome sits significantly higher or lower than what your base plate attachment is, you're going to have extreme angles, either up or down. And what's going to happen is when you go to take off, if your motorhome's significantly higher, it's going to pull up on the suspension of your vehicle each time, and that's going to help, just progressively wear out your suspension. Same thing if it's down, it's going to pull downward on your suspension every time you take off, and again, that's also just going to further wear out your suspension components. Keeping it nice and level like this is going to ensure we pull it straight, and that's just going to extend the life of our components. It's going to ensure that we're not prematurely wearing anything. You can get these high-low adapters here at eTrailer to get you this nice level toe right here, so that way you're pulling it nice and straight. To help determine if you need a high-low adapter, there's a couple of measurements you'll want to take. You'll need to check your motorhome, because each motorhome is going to be different. You're going to measure from the ground to the center of your hitch receiver. Get that measurement, and then you'll come over to your base plate here, and you'll measure this. I'm going to give you this measurement here because it's going to be the same on all your Jeep Grand Cherokees if you're using this base plate. And when we measure it, it's right at about 16 inches. So you'll take that 16-inch measurement that your base plate's going to be when you install it, compare it to your motorhome. If your motorhome's something like 22 inches, that's a pretty big difference. It's a difference of about 6 inches. So you'll want to get yourself a drop to bring it down and make it level. An acceptable measurement between the two is within 3 inches. So for example, we're 16 here on our base plate. If we were 19 inches here on our motorhome, that would be the absolute maximum before we would want to consider getting a high-low adapter. So now that we've got our tow bar fully attached, all we have left is to place our vehicle into flat tow and we're ready to hit the road. Last thing I wanted to talk about was the tow bars that are compatible with this base plate. We're using one from Roadmaster today, but the ends that are on it are for Blue Ox base plates, so it does have an adapter on there. Any Blue Ox tow bar will attach to this base plate without the need of any adapters, but here at eTrailer we do have those adapters available, and we also have some of them with the adapters pre-installed for different manufacturers, just like this Nighthawk from Roadmaster here. We'll have the adapters pre-installed for you, so you just need to take it out of the box, slide it in, and this Roadmaster product will connect directly to this Blue Ox product. So now that we've covered some of the features of our base plate, why don't you follow along with me and we'll show you how to get it installed. We'll begin our installation here at the front of the vehicle by removing the 2 pins underneath the hood here right at the top. This is our fascia here at the front. We're going to be removing the entire fascia, and if you're following along at home and you're looking at your instructions, you might not see anywhere where it calls out these 2 pins. It doesn't talk about these, but these 2 pins are going to hinder your removal of the fascia, so make sure you get these off. To remove them, you'll see that there's a little slot opening on one side of the pin. You can stick a flat bladed screwdriver in there or a trim panel tool, give it a little bit of a twist. And I actually like to use a combination of a flat bladed screwdriver because they fit into the little slots better to get it started, and then switch over to the trim panel tool to finish pulling it out. If the center pin, after it pops up, pulls completely out, that's no big deal. We can remove the rest of the pin. In most cases though, once that center pin pops out, the whole pin will come out. We'll just get underneath of it and just pry it up. We can then put these 2 pieces back together, so that way they're ready for reinstallation later. We'll go ahead and get that other one out the same way. Next, we're on our wheel well. We're on our driver's side here, and I did take the wheel and I turned it a little bit to the right towards our passenger side to give us a little bit more clearance here to be able to remove our fasteners that are in here. We'll have 2 rivets, one here and one here that we'll want to remove. We can use a 3/16 drill bit to do so. We're just going to drill out the center, and then that'll just pull right out of there. Once we get both of those removed, if we follow those rivets and just go straight up from them, we'll find a fastener up here. We're going to remove that with a 10mm socket. And now if we take that same line and go straight down, once we hit kind of the 2 lips here, where this piece meets kind of the mud flap there, if we head straight in, there is potentially a fastener located right here. Ours didn't have it, it wasn't there, it's not there on the other side either, but it would be a plastic little knob that you would just twist and pull out if it is present on your vehicle. Once we get this done on this side, we're going to do the same thing over on the other side. We're now underneath the vehicle, and across the front at the bottom here, you're going to have 4 pins along the front. We're going to remove those. Those are just like the ones that we removed up top. So we'll just pop out the center. Sometimes these can be tricky because of their location. Here we go. And just pull that out. Again, we're just going to repeat that for all the remaining 3 that we've got down here. So now we're gonna get ready to start removing the fascia. We need to get the trim off first. This just pulls outward. And once you get up to about the seam here, it changes to a different style of clip that's further back up in here. So you want to take your trim tool now, and we're going to go behind it and get our teeth behind the where the pin is. So we'll just kind of peel it back into look and then pop those out. You only need to get about 1 or 2 popped out, just enough to give you some room to work. So we're just kind of pulling back just a little bit, getting our tool up in there to help us pop it out of there. We're trying to kind of keep an eye on it while we're doing it, making sure that we're lining up with our clip. Pop that one out, and then we're going to move back to the next one and pop it out. And once we got both of those popped out, we're now just going to take a cloth and we're just going to kind of fold it up to give ourselves kind of a little spacer there, and then we can just kind of put this in place like that, and that'll keep it out away from our fascia, making it easier for us to get our fascia off without scuffing things up. So we'll prep the other side the same way. Now we can take the whole fascia off. We're going to start on one side. Right here at the seam, we're going to grab just below the seam and we're going to pull outward. I'm kind of using my thumb to kind of give me a little leverage there to pop it out. And we're just going to work our way towards the center. There are some little black tabs there. So if you're pulling on it and it seems like it's pretty stiff, you don't want to crack the plastic, you can take a plastic trim panel tool and push down in these little openings to push those little pins off to get it to release easier. We're going to keep working our way towards the center now. Get it popped out from underneath our headlight. I'm also using my body to kind of brace it to ensure I don't pull it off too far. And that's what we're looking for right there. We want to get it released all the way down to where our grill is. We're then going to go over to the other side and get it released to that same point. So now we've got it released to that point on both sides. The main thing holding it here is our tabs here at the top. So I'm going to grab the fascia here to make sure that I'm fully supporting it, and then we're just going to kind of pull up on these to get these to release. They just have like little tabs that hold them on. And then we'll walk it away very slowly because we do have some electrical connectors that are going to be located in here. So we're going to see where those are located. We can see that there's a connector here for our light. We're going to have this located on both sides. And these are kind of a pain to take off because they put a clip on each side. So you'll probably want to take a screwdriver and pull up on that clip on one side and push out. Then you can put it on the other side and use it to pry that side out. They really are kind of just a pain since they're on each side. There we go. Then we can follow this wiring here towards the vehicle, and we can feel that there's a connector up here. So we're going to disconnect this one as well. Press in on our release tab here, but we do have a lock tab. There's our red lock tab there, so we're going to push the lock tab away first. If you're having a hard time seeing it, you can just pop it off of there. There's our lock tab. We'll get that slid back, and then we can press the tab there and disconnect this one. We'll then set our fascia aside where it won't get damaged. Now I just want to touch back on the fascia removal. Some vehicles may have a sprayer that comes out at about this area that shoots out and sprays the headlight to clean them off. Our vehicle didn't have it, but if you do have that, you'll want to pull that sprayer out before you take your fascia loose. You can use a trim panel tool to do that and disconnect that sprayer, and then that'll pop back in, and then you can remove your fascia. With our fascia out of the way, we've got some more panels we need to remove. The plastic panels located here at the bottom of our bumper beam on each side, we'll remove those. There's 3 bolts that hold each of these panels on. We'll use a 10mm socket to remove each of these bolts. Now in the engine compartment on the driver's side, here's your washer solution bottle. There's the fill neck right there. We'll need to get this out of the way so that way we can get our base plate installed. There's a pin here we'll need to take off. These are just like the other ones, so we'll take our flat bladed screwdriver in there, pop this out of here. Get that one loose, and then we're going to head down on the side again to get the rest of the fasteners removed. So here we are on the side. Now this is the rest of our washer solution. We'll get our electrical connectors disconnected from it. So we're going to push back on the release tab here, the lock tab I mean, and that'll let us press the release tab to get it disconnected. We'll also disconnect this one here. These ones are a little trickier. I'd recommend a screwdriver for these ones, because we need to release the clip there. So I kind of put it in there and just gave it a twist. And then we can pop that up to get that off of there. We'll then get our wiring pulled off of our bottle here. And now the next thing we're going to do here, if you can, leave your bottle in place. We're going to remove the fasteners, but I mean leave it attached to the vehicle without removing your hoses. That'll save you the mess of having to drain this out and find a container for the fluid and all that nonsense. So we're going to see if we can't just take these loose and use a bungee cord to kind of keep it out of the way while leaving these attached to the vehicle. If that's not possible, then we'll have to disconnect the hoses and drain it out. So we'll just see if we can't make some magic happen here. We're going to use an 8mm socket to take out the two fasteners that hold it in place. There's one located up here, and there's also one located down here in the front. Supporting it now before removing this last fastener. And we'll see what we can do here. But it's looking like, more than likely, oh well, actually that's not too bad. This is the area that we need to work in right here. We got some plates we're gonna have to put in place here on the frame. But this is actually not too bad of a spot to keep this out of the way. So with that said, we're gonna then take a bungee cord, or you could use some cable ties, really whatever you kind of got laying around. We're just not going to get lucky with a bungee cord that has a hook on it that's going to do what we want it to here. So we're just going to wrap it around the body, and we'll then just get this kind of attached up onto something further up on the vehicle here. Bit of a stretchy bungee cord, so we're going to take a couple loops around it as well. That should work probably just fine there, keeping it up out of the way for us. On the opposite side, if you've got a compressor hanging down here, we need to get this bracket out of the way to have room to get the base plate installed. There's two nuts here in the front, and there's another one if we kind of come up around the back side on the bottom, back in here. So we're going to get both of these removed, or all three of these removed. We're going to use our 13mm socket to remove the nuts. Get that one off of there. This one off of here. And now we can kind of reposition it out of our way. So we're going to take it, and we're kind of pushing down on the back edge while pushing towards the rear. There we go. And all we're going to do is take that stud that was located in there, and we're going to pop it over into here. We'll go ahead and put a nut on it to hold it in this position, keeping it out of our way. Now, if you have tow hooks equipped on your vehicle, you'll need to remove those. So here you can see our tow hooks. We're taking off the driver's side one first. There's two bolts here at the front, and then the tow hook itself is actually threaded all the way here in the back, and it's got a very large nut on it. You'll need a 30mm wrench for the large nut here at the back, but if you don't got one with these larger sizes, you can get away with something that's a little bit bigger and a little sloppier usually and get it off of there. Like a 1 1/4 inch wrench, if you got one of those laying around, should probably do the trick as well. Or you could use an adjustable wrench, that's always an option as well. For these smaller ones here, we're going to be using a 17mm socket to get these removed. And I actually like to leave them just a hair in there, still like that. That way when I'm taking that nut out, it's got just something there to kind of catch it and brace it and keep it from spinning. And now we're just going to work this off there. And a lot of times too, when you take off those front ones, sometimes it loosens it up enough to where you can take it off by hand. Here, let's take a look. We're not going to be able to get it off by hand, but we'll just then slowly use our wrench here to work this off of there. and then we can slide our tow hook out, and we're going to repeat these procedures over on the other side to get that tow hook off as well. Normally, after you start getting this off so far, it does loosen up enough to where you can start taking it off by hand. You can see they got a little goo in there to help keep it in place. Yeah, we'll just have to go a little further with our wrench. So there we go, we can get the nut all the way off. Finish taking out these bolts and then slide the tow hook out. Now this next step isn't completely necessary, but it will make things easier to access your bolts. Because after we get our tow hook out of the way, this bracket here has to come off, and there's a bolt here, and there's also a bolt further in. And yeah, you can get a ratchet in here and you can take out this bolt. But if you want to get some larger like impact tools in there, then I would recommend taking this cover loose here. There's 3 bolts across the front. There's also a bolt here on the side where it connects to our fender liner. Same thing on the other side. And there's 1 pin here towards the driver's side, kind of the middle driver's side. So we're going to pop that pin out and we're going to zip those bolts out just to make it easier to get to the bolts that hold our tow hook brackets on. And we'll use a 10mm socket to remove the bolts. And now we'll take our 17mm socket again and we're going to zip these out. So we can get in there for that one, and for this other one here, we took those bolts loose so we could pull this panel down to easily zip these out. And we're going to remove the ones on the other side the same way. So next we're going to be putting our base plate into place. You're going to have 2 different size long bolts. You're going to have some that are 80mm and some that are 100mm. So the 100mm are slightly longer. The slightly longer ones are going to be for your front 2 holes here, and the slightly shorter ones are going to be for the rear 2 holes. All of our hardware is going to get red Loctite on it, so make sure you got that ready. This is anything that we're going to be using to secure our base plate to our vehicle. So we're going to take the Loctite, we're going to put some of that on there. And I've already put the other piece of hardware on here. I slid on a lock washer and a flat washer. These are going to slide through our base plate up through the bottom. So this is what our base plate would look like. It is side specific. The larger holes should be at the top and the smaller slotted holes at the bottom. So this will just drop in right through that. We'll then take the spacer that comes in our kit, and this is now going to slide over as well, and it's going to sit down in there like that. So we can now take the other spacer. I'm going to go ahead and take the other spacer and drop it in there as well, just because it can make things a little easier. You don't have to, you can kind of slide it in this way. So there are ways to get it in there, but if it's already kind of setting in there, it can be easier sometimes. So we're going to get it started up here, pushing it right up back to where our tow hook bolts used to be, and we're just going to get it started. Once we get that one started, we'll take the other bolt for the other side here. We're going to put some Loctite on it as well. And we'll put our spacer in there, slide our bolt up through the bottom, and then we'll get this one started as well. So here we have the 80mm ones. These are slightly shorter than the 100s we were just using. They're going to get the same hardware, same Loctite. Little thing to point out too is the head of the bolt here. To identify that these are metric bolts, so you know that you got the right ones, you'll see here on the head it'll either have 8.8 for its measurement or 10.9, and that's going to be the grade of the bolt. For your non-metric bolts that come in your kit, because you do have some long ones of those, they're just going to have dashes. So now we'll take this bolt, we're going to slide it up through the bottom of our base plate, not the large hole at the back here, the slotted one here on the bottom. That will thread right in to a factory weld nut in the bottom of the frame. We'll then prepare another bolt just like this, and towards the front, right behind the 2 bolts we had inserted, you'll have another slotted hole there. This will slide through and thread up into this hole. Next, we're going to be installing our side plate. That'll attach with the handle nuts that come in your kit, as well as the shorter bolts that come in your kit. And you actually have two different short bolts. You'll have ones that have a slight shoulder on them there, and then you'll have these ones here. You see they don't have any shoulder. These are about a 1/4 inch shorter than the other ones. The shorter ones are your top 2 bolts for each side, and the slightly longer ones are our bottom 2 bolts, and those are the ones we're going to use handle nuts with. I do recommend first just threading them into your handle nuts, because it's not uncommon for the handle nuts here to have like weld material and stuff like that in them, and it can be difficult sometimes to thread them in. So check first, because it's nothing like holding all this stuff together, trying to get your bolts threaded in there, and then you got some slag in here that's making it a real difficult time. So just verify that, clean both of those out if you need to. And then we're going to take these bolts here. Of course, we're going to put the old red Loctite on it. And now we're going to take our side plate. We can see here the side plate does have one edge that is slightly curved to it. So that curved edge is going to be our top edge, and then our flat edge is going to be our bottom edge. And we want the curve, the top, the longer edge of the curve, to be towards the rear of the vehicle. That way it lines up with the curve on our frame here. You can see our frame kind of gradually goes up as it goes towards the rear a little bit. So now we'll just hold this up here. These 2 holes here in the side of our base plate are going to line up with our 2 bottom holes. So we can go ahead, I'm going to take a handle nut also and kind of get this prepared so that way I can get in there easily. So I'm going to kind of bend the handle nut just a little bit here, just to make it a little bit easier for me to work with. And you can see we're just going to be sliding it in like that, lining it up in the hole, holding our bracket up there with the correct orientation, and then threading our bolt into that handle nut. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. And one of the things that can make this easier that I think I'm going to do is we got quite a bit of play here on all these parts. I'm not going to run them all the way down, but I'm going to zip them up just so it's not so loose. So we're going to hit those real quick. So I went ahead and used that 17mm socket we've been using to just kind of snug that hardware up just a little bit to remove this play to make this easier. Then we'll line up our bolt with our handle nut and get that threaded into there. Once we get that one started, we're just going to perform the same procedures for the other hole. And we're just poking that in there. And really, I'm not even using the handle that much. I kind of just bent the handle more out of my way. And I'm just kind of putting the handle nut in the back and lining it up with my hand there. So now that we've got those started down here, we can come back and we're going to zip these up here, and then we'll tighten these down, but we want to make sure that it's flush with the top of our frame when we're kind of zipping all these bolts down and lining up those components. So I'll grab my 17mm once again. We're just going to run these down all the way now. Check our frame. That feels pretty good right where it's at, so we're ready to zip those in. And now we swapped over to a 15mm socket for the 2 bolts that are here. I'm just keeping my hand flush kind of on top of the frame, feeling them as I snug these down. There we go. So that feels nice and flush with the top of the frame there. So at this point, we're ready to drill out the remaining holes. We'll use our bracket here as a template to do so. So I'm going to grab me a drill now with a 3/8 drill bit. Before we start drilling, we're just going to feel around behind here, maybe give a quick visual inspection, make sure that when we drill through this, we're not going to be drilling into any components. Everything looks good there. We don't have anything behind it that we need to be too concerned about. I mean, if we go too far, obviously we will, but our drill bit should limit the length, and we should have plenty of control over that. So I'm going to use a little bit of silicone spray as well. That can just help the bit cut a little bit easier, and we're going to get these drilled out of here. So now that we've got that one drilled out, we're going to be using those shorter bolts like we talked about, the ones that are about 1/4 inch shorter than the lower ones. Loctite on there. We're going to go through our bracket and the frame, and then take a nylon locking nut here, and we're going to thread the nylon locking nut onto the other side. And now we're just going to drill out the other hole on this side, get our hardware, the same hardware installed on this side, and then we'll perform all the exact same procedures over on the other side. We're going to snug these down as well too. They're going to be the same size as your lower bolts. We can now go back and torque our hardware to the specifications outlined in our instructions. So now we've got everything tightened down, we can get this excess handle nut that we've got on here, we can get this out of the way. The easiest way I found to cut these is to take your cutters, put them on there, and then put some pressure on them, but I mean, it's gonna be hard to cut through this as thick as it is, so with pressure on it, we're then just gonna take the handle nut and we're just gonna bend it back and forth like this, and that just works, makes your cutters work right on through it. So we're gonna do the same thing with this one, so you can see it again here. I'm just kind of working it back and forth. And the snips just kind of slide right on through the metal when you do that. After we've got our handle nuts trimmed, we'll install our permanent safety cables. That's these cables here. This needs to wrap around your frame. So we're going around the frame, gonna go on top. I'm checking for any wiring or hoses or anything like that. We don't want to pinch it between our safety cable here and the frame. So it's just gonna run right around like that. Then you'll have a quick link that comes in your kit. Looks just like this. The quick link, we can drop down through the opening in the bottom of your base plate there. There's a pretty big hole. And then we're gonna take these safety cables, and these are just gonna slide right onto this quick link, just like that. And then we'll tighten down the quick link. We'll also repeat that over on the other side. So now at this point we can start reinstalling our components in reverse order of how we removed them, your washer bottle, your compressor, things like that. You can go ahead and get those back in place. But before we put our fascia back on, I highly recommend that you complete the rest of a full flat toe setup, which typically includes your diode wiring and your supplemental braking system. There's a lot of wires that's involved in installing those components, and while we've got our fascia off, a lot of that wiring has to run up here to the front of the vehicle, and it's going to be a whole lot easier while we've got this fascia off to complete those installations. So I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of this flat toe setup complete, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how to get that fascia back on. And I also wanted to point out, you do get a couple of brackets here that come in your kit. There's no specific location where these kind of go, but this will give you a mounting location for your wiring. So you can mount your wiring and your 6-pole connector up there. And this is gonna give you a mounting location for your breakaway switch. So until I get my other components installed and the wires routed up here, I'm really not 100% sure on the layout on where I want these to go. So once I get those done, then we'll kind of make a decision here on where's the best location for these, and we'll get these in place. With the vehicle, we've got the rest of our flat toe components installed. I didn't want to cover the electrical connectors we put here in the front. So for our 6-way mounting bracket, this black one this comes in your kit. We mounted it right here to the bumper beam. You can drill right through this. We used a 1/4 inch drill bit to drill out the holes, and I just used the bracket as a template to determine where the holes line up. They are slotted, so you do get a little bit of leeway there to be able to slide it back and forth, and that could be important later on when we go to line our fascia up, if we need to tweak it a little bit to the left or to the right to line up properly with where we're going to cut out. This is for our supplemental braking system, so you won't have this part, but we went ahead and got that installed as well. If you're doing an Air Force One, you could do something like this. We used the bracketry that came with it to attach it to our 6-way adapter to get that mounted there in the front. For our breakaway switch bracket, we actually took the bracket and bent it was in kind of a Z shape. We bent the one side completely straight because there was already a threaded hole right here in the bumper. So we were able to take a screw and thread it right in there to mount this up onto our bumper beam. That was the easiest way to do it. You do still have the option, if you wanted to drill through the bumper and then use the included nut and bolt that comes in your kit to mount it here on the bumper. But if you do have an extra bolt laying around, that'll save you a little bit of time. This material is very hard to drill through, so make sure you got yourself some fresh drill bits and some drilling lubricant to help it cut through the material. So now we got those flat toe components installed. I did also go ahead and put the washer bottle back in place. We just reinstalled the bolts to get that back on. And then over on the other side where we had moved the compressor out of the way, we did reinstall those as well. So now with an extra set of hands, we're gonna put our fascia back into position. It's not gonna fit all the way because we are gonna have to do some trimming. So we're just kind of holding it up in the relative location where it would go to line up. Kind of make sure we got everything roughly there. You can use your sensor here at the front as kind of a guide, because that's going to line up with the opening hole here. Probably have to trim about there. And we also have our breakaway switch over here on the other side, so we'll need to mark for this as well. So now we're going to go ahead and trim this out. We're just using our snips to do so. Looks like we got one spot here. And now we got that section trimmed out. We'll trim out the other side the same way. And then we can use a little bit of cleaning solution to get the yellow marks off there. So now that we got it trimmed out, we can just recheck our fit. And I've already tested it once, so I know that it does fit. So once you verify that it is gonna fit with your trims, make sure that you plug in any electrical connectors that you may have had disconnected. So we know there's one over here on this side. And it's right here. We can plug these back together. And we can also plug in our lights once again as well. And then we can gently raise our fascia back into position. As we're going up, we're also bracing it with our leg and checking down below for our components that need to pass through, so we can see our breakaway switch here and our base plate. Make sure those components pass through. Then we'll line up the fascia under the headlights and get those snapped in. And we can work our way down the sides, getting those snapped in. A little bit of a tap with your hand there. And now that we've got it all snapped back into place, we'll just double check our cutouts, make sure that our door opens. When I first did the test fit down here at the bottom, I did have to take out just one little more trim because it was hitting down there at the bottom. But now it opens easily. We can access all of our components. So we're gonna get this cleaned up now, and we're gonna reinstall all of our fasteners in reverse order of removal to get the fascia back on. When reinstalling the fasteners on your fascia, you will have a couple of rivets that come in your kit to replace the ones that we drilled out. You will need a plastic rivet gun to do this. We've got one here. You can get this at your local automotive store. The rivet will slide in there. We'll then take the other end. We're gonna push it in the opening where we had removed the rivet. So we're just sliding it right in there like that. Keeping a little bit of pressure pushed in on the rivet, and then we'll squeeze the gun. And it normally takes a couple of times. You have to squeeze it to pull pressure on it and to snap the end of it off there. You can then just repeat that for the remaining rivets. And that completes our installation of Blue Ox's base plate on our 2020 Jeep Grand Cherokee.